This is the Nikon 50mm f1.4 AIS. Hi guys, I'm Ben. In this series we're going to take a little look at the gear I use in my video and photography work. So the Nikon AIS range started in around about the 1980s. I picked up this copy on eBay. Really good value. Let's talk about the mechanical quality of the lens. First of all, the focus ring. The focus ring is buttery smooth. It really is. If you haven't handled one of these earlier lenses built from sort of 70s or 80s, you'll be astounded at the quality compared with today's plastic lenses. It's an all metal construction. The focus ring for video work really is ideal for several reasons. First of all, it's mechanically linked to the actual glass. So a lot of modern lenses have a focus ring which is electronically controlling a stepper motor inside the lens. So that ring, particularly on a lot of the Fuji lenses, which is the system I shoot with a Fuji X-T2 body. So a lot of the Fuji glass has a ring where if you move it slowly, it moves the stepper motor and therefore the glass quite slowly and precisely. If you move it quickly, then it'll move the glass much quicker. The problem with that is if you're trying to be consistent with your focusing, then that can be very difficult. Particularly if you're using it on a gimbal and you've got a motor controlling it, that can become very difficult to estimate where your focus is going to be. If you're doing any pull focuses, you don't know where the ring is going to be focusing exactly. With the mechanically linked, when you're moving it, it's always in exactly the same place. So a small shift in the focus when you're doing a pull focus is going to be consistently in the same place. You know, if you move right to one end, that's infinity, right to the other end is obviously, in this case, the close focusing is 0.45 meters, that's 45 centimeters. It actually feels like it's a little bit closer when it's paired to the XT2. Maybe that's because of the crop factor, I'm not sure. The other thing about the focus ring is the total movement from one end to the other is just over 180 degrees, which again means when you're focusing, when you're doing some run and gun shooting, means that you haven't got to move very far, you just got to move your hand around a little bit and you're actually focusing pretty much from one end to the other. Cheaper lenses, when you're focusing, actually affect the zoom of the lens. It's called focus breathing. So a lot of lenses, unless you've got a dedicated cinematic lens which have pretty much zero focus breathing, most camera lenses, most photography lenses do have focus breathing to some extent. A lot of modern, or certainly a lot of the cheaper modern glass has quite significant focus breathing. So if you're doing a pull shot, if you've got something in the foreground, something in the background, you want to focus from one point to the next point, got a pull focus, then if you've got focus breathing, as you move from one end to the other, it actually zooms and sort of crops your image, which can be quite distracting. Now, these older Nikon AIS lenses are particularly good for having very little focus breathing. This 50mm has got just a very small amount, certainly not enough to be a distraction. Most of the focus breathing happens right at the extreme end, so right when you're sort of like almost on the closest focus you can get. For the majority of the range, it's almost nothing. The aperture ring, when we talk about the aperture ring on these lenses, it is a clicked ring, so it goes from f1.4 to f16. It's in full stop clicks, stopping at 16, 11, 8, 5.6, 4, 2.8, 2 and 1.4. You can probably actually see when I open and close the aperture blades. It's completely manual control. So obviously in your camera can't control it. It is all on the lens, which for me is a positive. I prefer to use all my controls manually. It's one of the things that attracted me to the XT2 is the manual controls. Obviously for video work, having clicks on your aperture ring can be a problem if you're constantly going from light to dark areas. It's not the sort of thing I do really. I tend to shoot in one area. I don't tend to do much run and gun. If you were doing more run and gun and you felt like you had to change the aperture on the go, having clicks can give you sudden light changes. On this Nikon lens, in fact on all the AIS lenses, they can be fairly easily converted to clickless, stepless aperture. The way that works is on the inside of the aperture ring, it's got a series of indentations all the way around the inside of this black ring, if you were to take it off, and inside the camera body is a very small spring with a little ball bearing. The spring pushes the ball bearing into each of the indentations, so as you move it, that's what you're hearing, the click of the ball bearing clicking its way as you move it around. So what you can do is you can take the ring off fairly easily. You can take off the back of the lens if you know what you're doing with that sort of thing. Take out the spring, take out the ball bearing, and you've got a perfectly smooth, stepless aperture ring. Perfect. So whilst we're talking about aperture, one of the things which I really like about this lens is the exquisite way it renders the out of focus areas at the back for the bokeh. It's particularly nice, probably because it stops right down to 1.4. It gives you a really nice blurred background. It really is exquisite. It's one of my favourite lenses. The focal length is obviously 50mm, but that will be on a full frame camera. When you're shooting it on aps-c, like I do, with a crop factor, it gives you around about 85mm, which is perfect for a lot of close work, for portrait work. It's a really versatile lens. So what I'm shooting with at the moment is the Nikon 24mm AIS lens. It's another one of my favourites. The camera is actually literally just there. I can reach out and touch it. Still gives me a reasonable view of the environment behind me. So what we're going to do is switch over to this, which is a 50mm. So what you're seeing now is the 50mm attached to the X-T2. I'm using an adapter. I'll post a link to the adapter. It's a K&F concept adapter. What you were seeing was this Nikon 24mm f2.8. So whereas before the camera was almost touching me, it's now more than twice the distance away. It's about 2 meters away from me, and as you can see, the background is really quite blurred out. I can bring it in, crop it right in close. This sort of gives you a fairly good equivalent view. As you can see, it's really creamy, really beautiful. It's really one of my favourite lenses. For tripod work, it is ideal. When I'm using it on the gimbal, I use the Weebill S, which I'll review in a later review. When I'm using it with that, it's really good for product shots. It's good for compressing the background, obviously with the 85mm focal length. It's very good at bringing the background closer into you, but not giving you quite so much of a wide view, which is a focal length I particularly like. I really like to work with. So I hope you found this review helpful. It's certainly one of my favourite lenses, so I'd be interested in your comments. Tell me what you think. Are you thinking about getting one of these? Do you already have one? Are you using it in your videos or photography when you're using it on a crop sensor body? Love to know, guys. Post in the messages below, and I'll be back for another review shortly.